Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm taking a look at the Eachine Novice-I. The aim of this kit is to provide everything a beginner needs to get you in the air at an affordable price, hence the name. But sadly, I think if you buy this kit as a beginner, it would either put you off the hobby completely or force you to upgrade pretty much everything. So I'll quickly sum up why that is now to save you watching the rest of the video if you aren't interested in the finer details. The goggles and the transmitter are toy grade, but the model is hobby grade, so it's actually a lot more difficult to fly than it should be, and it'll give you a bad first impression of FPV. And I really want to stress this point because having a good first experience is crucial when trying to get new people into the hobby, and in my opinion, this package doesn't achieve that. The model is a powerful brushless micro that requires pinpoint accuracy, which this transmitter can't deliver because it's using cheap game controller parts instead of proper gimbals. So out of the box, the controls are either on or off, and the model is pretty unflyable. I've been flying RC for nearly 30 years and my first flight with this lasted less than 30 seconds. Luckily, there is a silver lining to this. Eachine do sell a product called the Eachine E013 and the price point is much lower. And while it comes with a toy controller and toy goggles, the model is also toy grade. So that would be my recommendation to get what people are calling a taste of FPV instead of this kit. The ready-to-fly Emax Tiny Hawk package would also be my other recommendation because it comes in at a similar price point to the Eachine Novice. The transmitter is slightly better with the Emax package, the goggles are better, and the model is 1S only. I actually made a video where I gave mine to a friend who learnt to fly on the Tiny Hawk and can now fly 5-inch models on his own. So I'll add a card to the top right of this video if you want to take a look at that. So I fed back to Eachine that I think they should just release this model as a bind and fly, and they said that they aren't going to do that. So instead they have offered a 20% discount coupon which is limited to 20 uses, as well as a 10% discount coupon with no limit if you still like the idea of the model. And if you want to proceed with that, then it's worth watching the rest of this video before deciding to do so. I've done my best to try and make use of the included transmitter and goggles if you've already bought it as well. The kit comes in two variants. This is the Fly More version and comes with 10 LiPos, and the other version only comes with 2 LiPos. The transmitter looks to be repurposed from another product due to it having this pull-out holder for something like a monitor or a phone. I think I've seen it sold with like a hydro dip or something. I've converted mine to mode 1 and I'm glad I did so that I could see how badly matched it is for the model that comes with this kit, but it's only available in mode 2, so don't be confused where my throttle is. It's using the FrSky D8 protocol. It takes 4 AAA batteries which are not included, and by the time I had completed 4 flights, its low battery alarm started beeping. There's a USB port underneath the batteries which does power up the transmitter, but it doesn't act as a joystick when plugged into a computer, so you can't use it with a simulator or something like that. To power the transmitter on, it's a long press of this left button, and the button opposite is a bind button. Everything did come pre-bound out of the box. I take issue with the top 2 buttons because they are momentary but are being used as a 3-position switch. You can see when I press this left one, some LEDs light up to show you which position the switch is in. And that's fine for line of sight, but you can't see the LEDs when wearing the goggles. And this button came set up as an arming switch where the model arms in the middle position, but motor stop is turned on, so initially nothing will happen unless you go up on the throttle. And then the next position is armed and air mode, so if you need to quickly disarm, a beginner is going to be massively confused because it's either a single or double press of this button to disarm depending what mode you are in. The same goes for this one on the right, which is set up for stability mode in the first position and then acro in the second and third position. This is less confusing because the on-screen display of the model has been set up to show the mode that you're in, but it's still a lot for a novice to think about. Luckily, if you press down on the sticks, there are 2 extra switches which only have 2 positions, on or off. Out of the box, one does nothing and the other sends the model into turtle mode or flip over after crash. So I've switched arming to the stick that doesn't have my throttle on it because I tend to apply more pressure on my throttle stick and end up pressing down on the button, which I don't want because that would disarm it in the air. But on the other side, I seem to apply less pressure, and that's working much better because I can now arm and disarm the model with a single press rather than cycling through multiple switches. I've also turned motor stop off and have air mode on permanently, which I recommend for flying in general. Doing that has freed up the left momentary button for non-crucial things such as turtle mode, and I've also added a lost model alarm because that wasn't set up either. The model doesn't have a physical buzzer, so it's only D-shot commands, but it's better than nothing. And of course, all of those changes are made in Betaflight and not on the transmitter itself. Onto the goggles, and for me, they are almost unusable. They look like they're designed for a child's face, but the faceplate isn't round enough for an adult, so there is light leak everywhere. The nose cutout is quite large, but it still catches really badly on my nose, and even though they provide these bits of rubber that just sort of flap around, I was left with a cut on my nose just after one flight. The resolution is listed as 960 by 240, and thanks to you guys in the comments, I've learned that some regions count the red, green and blue, also known as RGB, as individual pixels, which isn't true. Collectively, the red, green and blue result in a single pixel, therefore making the panel 320 by 240, which is a really low resolution. However, I don't think that can be correct either because the screen's aspect ratio is 16 by 9 and 320 by 240 results in a 4 by 3 aspect ratio. And considering I can physically see almost every single pixel on the screen, I'd say the resolution could be even lower than what they are quoting. They have a built-in 1S 1000 mAh LiPo and charged via a USB port, and you're given the cable for that. It's got 2 RPSMA connectors, but I can't confirm whether it's proper diversity or not. They have got previous for just having a dummy antenna. The package also includes 2 linear antennas. It's got a power button as well as an auto scan and individual band and channel buttons. They have an on-screen display, but the font is black, so when you're searching for your channel you can't see the on-screen display because a feature of Snow is the color black. So you have to use the auto scan feature, which will land you on the wrong channel, but it will allow you to see the on-screen display of the goggles just about. And the model has smart audio, but the VTX channel hasn't been added to the model's on-screen display. So I added that through Betaflight and then set it to race band channel 1 in the CLI. I then had to count from the channel it landed on to channel 1 and then go through the bands until I got the correct channel. So it turns out that band E is race band if you're interested, and even then the goggles on-screen display can't be turned off, so it gets in the way of some of the icons from the model's on-screen display. So what about the model? Well, it's using the Mobula 7 frame, which is decent, and the motors are Eachine branded 1102 13,500 kV, along with the Gemfan push-on props, and you get a spare set of those, which is all well and good. But the flight controller seems to be a copy of the Happy Model Crazy Bee V1 board, and if you are a novice or a beginner, then you might not know that this version of the board had a lot of problems, and Happy Model's version of it is currently on version 3. Now, out of the box, you shouldn't get any problems, and that's because they're using the very inefficient PH2 connectors wired in series. So you have to insert the sticky foam pads provided in the package into the battery bay, and then use 2 of the 300 milliamp 1S LiPos, which creates a 2S voltage. You can use it in a 1S configuration, but I'll get onto that later. This setup is how the original Mobula 7 was configured, but it was killing the 1S LiPos after just a few flights. In fact, these 10 1S LiPos are the only ones I have of this kind, because all of the rest are puffed and had to be recycled. And that's going to happen to all 10 of these batteries, because the PH2 connectors are only rated for a current draw of 2 amps, but the ESCs are rated to 5 amps each. This creates a bottleneck at the connector and causes each individual LiPo to sag below 3.3 volts as soon as you take off, which breaks down the chemistry of these LiPos very fast. So people started adding XT30 connectors, which got rid of this bottleneck and the voltage sag, but it then created a problem for the all-in-one board. The ESCs were being overdriven due to the higher current draw, and the surge of current from just plugging in an XT30 connector was too much for the now underrated 5 volt onboard regulator, so those were randomly going up in smoke as well. The reason I'm explaining this is because you're going to go through these batteries really quick, and you're going to have to be buying new ones all of the time, and there aren't really many options to improve it without risking blowing something on the board. One thing you can do is replace the PH2 connectors with solid pin PH2 connectors. These are open pin, which means that they splay out to grip onto the battery, but it also means there is less contact between the connectors, therefore creating a greater resistance. Solid pins are exactly as the name describes. They don't splay out. The connection is thicker and there is less resistance. It still proved to be much less effective than adding an XT30 connector and using a normal 2S LiPo, which is why the Crazy Bee boards are now on version 3 and have upgraded components. So, unless you want to keep buying these batteries, you might end up wanting to upgrade the all-in-one board as well as the goggles and the transmitter. So what about using this as a 1S model? They give you this plug which completes the circuit, so you can just plug one LiPo in, but there is still a problem of voltage sag, which will ruin the LiPo in the same way as running it as a 2S, and there's only one way to fix it, and that's to go up in capacity. Emax had this covered all along, because if you go up in capacity along with the C rating, then the LiPo won't puff, and the proof is in the pudding, because all of these 450 milliamp Emax LiPos are as old as the model when it first came out. They get used every week and are still in pristine condition, and luckily this LiPo fits the bay of the Eachine Novice. So unless you want to be buying LiPos all of the time, I think this model will be better suited to flying on 1S with an Emax LiPo, which is why I recommended the Emax Tiny Hawk, because its performance is going to be better than this in terms of power and agility on 1S. The only advantage the Novice has over the Tiny Hawk is its VTX in camera. The VTX is power switchable up to 200 milliwatt via smart audio, although that power is kind of wasted given that the built-in receiver is only good for about 80 meters, and that's with the antenna wedged upright, which I recommend doing. And the camera is the Runcam Nano 2, and there's no doubt that it's a better camera than the one on the Tiny Hawk. The canopy is very similar to the Eachine Twig, except for some reason it's got no support at the front, so I'll have to see how it performs, but there's a little bit of play in it, which usually results in jello on a sunny day. Everything comes in this pouch, and you get a couple of manuals as well as a charger and a mini screwdriver, a prop remover, and some spare screws. So I'll quickly show you how I've got this set up in Betaflight. Got motor stop turned off, and I've got the motor idle set at 5.5. We've got the PID loop frequency at 8K. I think it was set to 180 for the arming out of the box. You can see we are using the FR-Sky D protocol there, so D8. I turned air mode on here, but I think everything else was turned on, and then the RX loss and RX set I turned on. I think that was everything in there. For the power and battery, I think I left this stock actually. You can see that they've got the warning set really low, knowing that the voltage is going to sag. Now if we go into the PID tuning, this is where I had to do a lot of work to use the stock transmitter. So I've got a load of RC Expo in there because there is just a huge dead band in the middle here. So if I just move the roll axis and all the other axes, you can see that there. Another important one was the throttle curve. So when I initially went up on the throttle, it was like the throttle was on a switch, on or off. So I have got the throttle mid at 0, so it slowly curves upwards, and that really has made a difference. I haven't touched any of the PIDs, but I have put my own rates in there, and it's quite docile because of this RC Expo. And then when you get to the edge of the sticks, it gets a little bit more sensitive, so you could probably dial this down a little bit more if you are a beginner. Then if I go into the modes tab, I'll show you what I've done there. Now it might be different for you because I've converted this transmitter to mode 1, but I'll just press down on the stick, and this is the arming. So I'm pressing down on the stick that has got my pitch and rudder, and you can see that it changes. Now it might not be auxiliary 3 because I've switched my pots around, but all you need to do is just press auto there, and then press the button and it will automatically show it as auxiliary 3. So that's arming on and off. Then on here, this is where I have got my modes, and that's on the top right momentary switch. So it's in angle mode there, and then I've added horizon because it wasn't there, and then here now we have acro and air because air mode is permanently on. Then if I come down here, I have got the beeper for the AUX 1, which was originally for arming. So if I press that, it'll go into beeper mode. And then if I scroll down in the last position, I've got flip over after crash or turtle mode. And as I say, you just need to select auto and then press whichever button or switch you want it set up as. But that's how I've got it set up to make the most out of this transmitter. As for the on-screen display, I just added this here, which gives me the channel and also the band and the power output. So that's race band, channel 2, and then power output as 1, which is 25 milliwatt. I think I did remove some things as well, and I put them on the other profile. So I removed the warnings and I removed the disarmed option. Actually, I understand why that is there if you are using their method of the auxiliary switches cycling through, because it tells you when it's disarmed. It'll always tell you when it's armed, but it won't necessarily tell you when it's disarmed. So I've actually turned that off, but in their configuration, having that turned on might be a benefit. And just little things like turning max speed off and stuff like that because it doesn't have GPS. Okay, let's go for a line of sight flight with this guy. This is the 2S configuration, so the two 1S LiPos plugged in series. That throttle curve that I've added really making a difference. So I'm in angle mode at the moment, but let's just see what the power is like. Oh yeah, plenty of power. Quite a windy day here today though, so I want to make sure I don't get too far away from myself. Yeah, the wind is really pushing it. That yaw is very twitchy, and I think It's just the inconsistency of these cheap Xbox style pots. And if you can actually learn to fly with one of these transmitters, then when you upgrade to a hobby grade transmitter, it's going to be so much easier. There's no drift in angle mode, so I'm going to go into horizon mode next. So the model will still stabilize itself, but if you go to the edge of the stick, then you can do rolls and flips, but it'll still stabilize itself. Now that's good for learning aerobatics line of sight. However, if you're flying FPV and you've got a strong wind that you are facing into, if you're having to put in a lot of forward motion to combat that, you could eventually end up doing a front roll like that, which we don't want. So yeah, quite twitchy on this transmitter, even though I have reduced the rates, and it's just down to the low resolution of these pots. So gonna go into acro mode now, and this is where I'm the most scared, because yeah, there's such a dead zone with this transmitter. You see how snappy it is for me to correct it. That is just me on the sticks trying to combat that dead zone. You can fly with it, but it's funny because it's really difficult to fly compared to a hobby grade transmitter. So you could look at it in two ways. You could say, well, that's a good thing, because if you can fly in this transmitter and master it, then hobby grade is going to be really easy to fly. But on the other hand, it could be so difficult that you actually can't learn how to fly on this transmitter and you give up, and we definitely don't want that. So now I'm going to try the setup which I believe is going to be better for this model. So I've got the jumper in there on the PS2 connector, which they provide in the package, and then the 450 milliamp 1S Emax LiPo, because it fits in there, and this is it in a 1S configuration. So I'm still going to be in angle mode, so I'm going to arm it and go up on the throttle. And despite me having that throttle curve, the hover point is about the same. However, because we're just running 1S and the capacity of that battery is bigger, we should not ruin our batteries. So let's see what the punch is like on 1S. So yeah, obviously not as much as 2S, but it's much more manageable for a beginner, I would say. And you're not going to be spending a fortune on LiPos either. I'm yet to have one of these 1S Emax LiPos puff. But yeah, definitely a power difference, which should be expected. We have halved the voltage. But just flying it around like this seems more docile. And interestingly, that snappy yaw doesn't seem so much of a problem. Now you could probably still do acro with the 1S, but I'm not sure I'd recommend it. I haven't changed any of the tune either. I'm not hearing any oscillations or anything like that. So yeah, I think if you are a beginner, then this is the capacity I would use it in, and not the 2S. I think it's a little bit powerful when you combine it with this transmitter, because it's actually more difficult to fly than some hobby grade models. but it's much more tamer with 1S. So I think that's the angle they should have gone in, like Emax did with the tiny hook. Anyways, let's bring it in for a landing. You can see how easy it is for me to disarm having it on the single switch there. But anyways, this flight was done with the stock transmitter, as you can see, because I went into a roll and was really struggling to maintain level when I came out of it, even though I have changed the rates and also added that expo in there. And I'm also using the goggles that comes with the kit as well. So you can't record with the goggles. So the footage we're looking at is from the Fat Shark HDO DVR, and it is not giving a good representation of what I was seeing through the goggles. You'll notice that I'm not pointing the model at the sun for very long, and that's because through the goggles it was almost like I was flying at night, and then a cloud came over, and you can see here, even on the Fat Sharks, how dark the images got. Through the goggles, it just went pitch black, and I couldn't see a thing, even in this direction. So yeah, not a fan of the goggles. They're digging into my nose. Just look how dark it's gone anyway, so I decided to do a split S. And at the same time, with the on-screen display of the goggles, I can't see my RSSI properly. I mean, it's really low resolution anyways. I wanted to do a range test, but looking at this anyways, it's sort of hovering around the 50s, and I think it's just, let's see, yeah, it went into the 30s there. So again, about 80 meters, so you can't really take advantage of that powerful VTX. I am getting used to flying it though, you can see. It is a windy day, but just as I suspected as well, if we go up on the throttle, just look at that voltage sagging right down to 5 volts, and you can see as soon as I took off, the voltage was reading 6 volts, and you should be landing at that, and that's where all of this damage is being done to the battery. So yeah, this is a 2S flight, and you get a decent flight time, but you're going to be buying those batteries all of the time if you want to keep this configuration. So I hope they take this feedback on board and perhaps even scrap this model and then bring it out as a bind and fly and stick that Crazy Bee V3 board on there, because it's flying great. Do you know what? I'm trying to trick it out. So if you are a novice, you won't be aware that these brushless tiny whoops, they do struggle with something called yaw washout, and that's just because they are a little bit too heavy for the power that they have, so they start doing strange maneuvers when you do split S's and dives. This model didn't do that. So as a model on its own, it's actually really good. It just needs that upgraded board. You can see me there with the Fat Sharks around my neck and then looking like an idiot with the stock goggles on my face cutting into my nose. And also at this point, I was actually looking for a landing position, but I couldn't because the picture is just so dark. And I'm trying again because I'm seeing the voltage flashing every now and again. I can just about see it through the on-screen display. I thought, well, I'll see if I can get around these trees without crashing. I just about managed it, I think. But yeah, you can see the voltage flashing there now, so I need to come in for a landing. That is the best you are going to get out of this package. And bear in mind, I've been flying for a long time. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I do okay. Did you notice that it was quite a sunny day there as well, and I wasn't getting that much jello through to the feed. Now you can see the voltage here, 8.12, and when I arm, that will drop instantly into the 7s and get very close to the 6s where you should be landing. And that is the problem with this model. It needs the Crazy Bee V3 board on there so you can use a proper XT30 connector. And check this out, roof tap. So this is much later on. I've ditched the stock transmitter and also the goggles. I'm using my FrSky X9D and also the HDOs, and it turned the model into an absolute beast apart from that voltage sag. Now I've flicked it into stability mode and just watch this. It's the pinpoint accuracy I was talking about that the stock transmitter can't give you. That hoop is so small, and I did end up crashing into it a few times, even with hobby grade stuff. But this is what I'm talking about. I don't think you're going to get a good first experience with the stock transmitter and goggles, but just look at this. I'm able to follow a plane indoors with this thing in acro and air mode, and I actually go through that hoop in acro and air mode as well. I'm getting much smoother rolls, and like I say, I can do roof taps, I can do backflips and loops and stuff like that. Now, it's unfortunate because by this point I've probably lost a lot of the more experienced flyers, but you can actually get all of the individual parts of this model separate. So if you are after the ultimate brushless tiny whoop for the winter, then you can actually build one up yourself using all of these parts apart from the all-in-one flight controller, and I think you would have a great setup. So I will link to all of the components in the below, which I think will make a really decent brushless tiny whoop. I didn't go for the 1S in the end. I just don't think it's worth it. Just go for the Tiny Hawk. It is a better option and it's similar price. Yeah, the camera in VTX isn't as good, but I think you will get in the air and at least have some kind of decent experience. So I will leave it there. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.